Alright guys, so at this point in time, we have the overall anatomy of the frog really pretty much locked in. We applied a little bit more meat texture around the eyes, just to kind of apply a little bit more ridges there. I'm going to apply a few like micro bumps throughout the whole project, just to give it a little bit of texture. Even though a lot of these frogs, they look like they're very ripply, they do have a very smooth overall skin, especially when they're in the water. And the gopher frog naturally is a gophering frog, so it's in the dirt. It's got some little water accumulation around their little gopher hole, but they do burrow, right? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and build a base. We need to get rid of this supporting piece in the very middle. So to do that, I need to make sure that these front legs have the support they need to survive the casting process. But you have to think about how you want to make the mold of the item. Now, I can make the mold to where we pour the casting plastic into the back legs or the front legs, but then we have this big piece of latex or silicone right here underneath it, and we cannot have that. Well, if I make the mold to where we pour from the very top, like through a funnel, that's doable. But if we do that, then I need to make a seam line to where this breaks apart. So it's either you make a seam line to where it breaks into two pieces, but you also have to think about, like, is it going to tug on these legs when I go to cast this? It's very likely. And because of their thin nature, it's very easy for those to potentially break. And then you have just like a foot that's missing. You have to recast it. I ran into that similar problem when I made the little tree frog for the Goliath bird eater tarantula not too long ago. And I don't want to run into that problem now. So whenever you're making your molds of your items that you've sculpted, you just need to think about that quite often, about how is it going to perform when you go to make the mold or cast it out of the mold. Although we're using great products to make the molds, we want to make sure that we're successful in those endeavors. So I think what we're going to do is I'm actually going to build a small kind of foundation base that's going to go under the frog. It's going to be very simplistic compared to the diorama that I planned for the gopher frog to go on. The base for the gopher frog is a little bit abstract. It's going to have like an abstract water effect that comes down, so it's going to have a wooden... I'll actually bring it out. This is the actual base that it's going to have. So as you can see, we're going to have the rock formation around the bottom. We're going to have a rock formation around top, and we're going to have the gopher frogs sitting up here, and we're going to do a more refined water effect down this rigid UV resin casted straw. So there's two straws here. One is a rigid, one is a flexible pipe, and we're going to go ahead and apply more strength to this as we apply the epoxy. But I want to make sure that, one, he's a big frog, so he's probably going to go down here. And up here, I'll probably apply like a muddy texture, and we'll probably cut him in half and just apply one of the heads up here. So it'll be the same frog, we'll be just using it in different ways to where it doesn't feel like they're the same. We could also paint them slightly differently. So we'll use that. But I want to make sure that he can kind of sit up on his own. But if I create a small base similar to this, but just a smaller version, that's what I'm looking for. I want to also give it a natural support around the belly so that it's holding him up slightly to give it a little bit of strength, because I could sell this little diorama just as it is for, say, like a little side table or a coffee table, just casted that, or I can cast it, cut the frog away, and then put that frog on another diorama. So you can use it a lot of different ways, and I want everything to be very multi-purpose used in a lot of different ways. So what we're going to do now is I'm going to go ahead and pull out a little bit more monster clay, and we're going to create kind of a rock texture base with maybe a little bit of a divot for a little bit of a puddle water feature. Not a whole lot, but just a little bit. And that's going to give this little frog the support and also just the overall completion that it needs. It's going to apply upward support to the frog to keep him upward, and it's also going to give us something to lock those little feet and toes onto, to where they're less likely to break when we're casting them because they're against a hard surface. And I'll mention that later on in the casting and the mold making processes when I get to those videos about that and how I'm going to do that. It's more so about support, multifunctional, and looking good. So let's go ahead and get a little rock base created for this diorama, and then we'll start to think about the actual molding process. Alright, so let's go ahead and jump right into some monster clay, you guys. Now here's our little gopher frog already completed out. Well, for the most part completed out. I do have some little small striations along the legs and bumps to add here and there, and just like little nitpicking over the entire item where I'm kind of like picking it up, smoothing some areas out with my fingers unintentionally. Now, I intended to get rid of that little dollop of clay below the belly, and I was really wanted to, but as I worked through this sculpting process, I really decided to make the overall molding process just easier. But I'll describe that a little bit later on in this video, so just hang tight, we'll get to that here in a little bit. Now, as you can see, I have my beautiful, lovely, nice, warmed up monster clay in my little crock pot there. I do like using the crock pot for my monster clay because it only takes half the time to warm up, and it stays a lot warmer for a lot longer. It has a lot more versatility and longevity in keeping the clay warm. I do have a large dollop of clay kind of smoothed out there in a big old wad. And we're going to go ahead and pack that down, and then we're going to get the sculpting. Now, this is a real-time video of me sculpting, you guys, so hang tight. We're going to go blast through this. It's not very hard to make rock textures, but I thought it would be kind of cool to kind of just make a solo video of us creating this. I'm really going to like just lay the tools onto it, and we're going to create some fun shapes and give it a lot of texture. So first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and lay out just a nice flat layer of clay, and this is designed just so that it can be just big enough to give us a little like kind of ecosystem for the frog to sit on. So it needs to fit all four legs on there in a nice even manner. Using the ball stylus tool there, we're going to mush all that out there. And then we're going to start to work into some textures. Now, just use the rocks. Okay? Oh, you may call it cheating if you want. And you may call it very simplistic sculpting, but you use what you have. It's no different than using the right paintbrush for the right stroke that you're trying to use on the canvas. And these are just tools that you can use to expedite the process. Now, you could take a sculpting tool and you could spend hours sculpting every little striation of rock if you wanted to. You can do that. That's no problem. Or you could go out in your driveway or in your yard or the woods, and you can get some nice, clean, awesome looking abstract shapes of rocks. You can get little small thin ones, you can get large ones, you can get all sorts of different shapes. But anyways, the most important thing is that you use those rocks in the correct manner to give the rock formations a realistic look. So sometimes you'll use the very smooth, flat side. Sometimes you'll use a jagged edge. Sometimes you'll use the existing breakage of the rock as it kind of cascades around the edges of the little rock formation that we're creating. And it doesn't have to be a rock formation. If you go over this with like a dirt flocking, then technically speaking, it's just dirt texture. You're just building up the base to build on top of. I'm using these flat rocks here to kind of roll up and then over the edge. I don't want it to be truly like rounded around the edge. I just feel like that's sometimes too easy, and it looks like it's too manufactured. So I will kind of bring in a little bit different textures here and there. My goal is to also include a little bit of a water feature on this. If nothing else, I want it to be a little bit of like a water puddle type of feature. Whereas I'll make a little batch of resin, and instead of doing like a super deep pour or a tint, I'll just do a barely like one drop of ink in it. I'll just barely tone it, and then I'll just let it settle into all these nooks and crannies where the puddle is, over like a muddy puddle. It'll be very subtle, it'll be very, very easy, but it won't be like so overpowering that it just takes over the entire like diorama, right? So it's gonna make it look like the frog is just sitting down in a nice little damp puddle where it is on the outside of that burrow. Burrow? You heard me say burrow, didn't you? Yes, we're gonna pull out some more clay in just a moment here, and we're gonna make a little the simulation of where a burrow would be, as if the frog were burrowed into the dirt, or a snake hole, or like an old tortoise, burrowing tortoise. I did not know that. Like a lot of frogs, a burrowing frog like this, they actually use the existing burrows of burrowing tortoises. Never knew that was a thing until I watched the documentaries on them. Pretty cool. So sometimes I'll pull out rocks that have a lot more jagged edges to them, just to get a lot deeper textures there. You can also use that while this clay is still warm, and you can really push the clay around in particular areas to get like very deep ingrained like textures. You can also use the sides of sharp rocks like this, and you can kind of go sideways, and you can create like little divoted or like lateral like textures in the rock, things like that. So it's pretty cool. We will also use some big rocks in a moment though. So yeah, there it is, easy as that. What, it took us like 5 minutes, like 3 or 4 minutes, maybe 5 minutes to go ahead and sculpt that little base out. That was super easy, guys, don't lie. Now, of course, we're using rocks. It is very simplistic. Again, if you want to make some like stencils or some pressure molds, you can do that, and then you can use those to make your rocks. But then again, you're also just using rocks to make those too. But you can go about it however way you want to. I just kind of want to show a simplistic way of making rocks, and sometimes that's just using rocks. Use rocks to make rocks. Easy as that, right? All right, so let's go ahead and get the clay back out here. Still the same batch, it's still warmed up. We're just pulling it out, and we're gonna go ahead and put on a little bit more clay on the back side of this little, let's just call it a mud puddle. So we'll go ahead and attach a little bit more clay here, and we're going to kind of bring this up and then over around the back of the mud puddle here. So we're going to build that up there, just pushing that in. Make sure you're sure to blend all the blend lines. You got to remember that this is not the final effect. This is monster clay, right? So all this gets melted down after. So it really doesn't matter if it's blending well on the interior of the structure. It just has to blend well on the outside for our latex in this situation to go over. So we're going to go ahead and make sure that we kind of blend the outside, don't have to blend the inside of the rock structure or the dirt structure into the lower portion here. I'm going to go ahead and get us a little bit of texture here, but what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to set this rock into position, and we're going to leave this. And what we're going to do is we're going to sculpt this back part of the mud puddle around the rock. And when we remove the rock, it's going to give you the simulation that it's a burrow, as if the frog had burrowed down into this dirt section. Now, you could go really above and beyond, and you could like make it super duper deep into the item, and then you could keep going and make it look like it goes back through like the back of the item there, and make it a like legitimate hole and things like that. You can go above and beyond like that if you wanted to make like a hollow cast at the very bottom and then make it all dark and painted. But we're going to use our paints when we come into detail that to make it look like it's a hole. So we're going to use our paints to simulate that, and of course we're going to put some nice cool like flockings and things like that, like grass, static grass around it, and it'll be very cool. It'll look very realistic and it'll look very cool, but we're going to use the paints to simulate the depth of that burrow. We're going to use this rounded, the edge of the rounded piece of rock here now, not the jagged piece that's or discolored by the existing red dirt that I pulled that out of. We're using this smooth texture. That was a smooth texture that was exposed to the elements, and then it's, of course, that's why it's a lot smoother instead of jagged, potentially. That's the reason. Making sure to use a smaller rock just to get the under edges right there. I do want to make sure that the bottom of the item is a little bit tapered, but not too much. As long as it's tapered just a little bit, I'm happy with that. And if it didn't come out right in the casting process after I make the mold, then I can always like sand that down or change the way the shape is just ever so slightly. So right now I'm just trying to get just some good textures across this back portion of the dirt mound. And once I'm happy with that, then we'll kind of go in and start to get the frog into position. Now, don't get me wrong, guys. You can go back and you can watch the time-lapse version of me sculpting the frog as well as this mound of dirt. You can go back and you watch that extreme time-lapse and you can see the entire project. And I'll probably even link it at the very end of this. But this is just about really just us working on the rock portion of this with these rock textures, okay? But in the process, I do have to sit the frog on the item, and in doing so, I do have to build up rock textures to allow the frog to sit level. So I will include that here as well, even though it's not like the most integral part of the actual rock textures of the monster clay here. So just be aware, we're going to include that here too, but in real time. But just be aware that it's also in the time-lapse version as well, where it's just super fast, super streamlined, and it just blasts right through it. And if you want to see the frog be sculpted as well, then that's along with that video. So you can always go check that out as well and see that in the time lapse. I'm going to remove a little bit of clay here from the back, so that way it doesn't have such like a downward taper onto the plastic below. So we'll just remove a little bit of that clay there, and then we will go ahead and detail that with the rock again, just to give it those existing textures, and then we will be good to go on that, I believe. Rolling the clay. So what we're doing is we're applying the rock formation there, and then we're rolling that up to get the good impression. We're also going to remove that rock there. As you can see, we can just pop that out, and you can already see with just the shadows. It's kind of hard to see what I'm seeing when I think about the painting process. You'll be able to see that in one of the upcoming videos of this playlist, so you can always go and check that out. If it's later on down the road, and then you can see all of those videos back to back and binge watch them. That's kind of fun. But you'll be able to see all of those videos as well. I may also make like a highlight reel type of video where you can kind of see all of the steps, even the molding and the casting processes of this, and static grass and flocking and detail painting of the rock formation, all those fun videos, like consolidated down into a nice super duper time-lapse easy to watch video, more so like entertainment than say educational like this is. We're also going to add a little worm of clay here to the entrance to the burrow. Let's just say that this was a burrow and the frog lived down in there. Sometimes he would kick dirt out from the burrow if it got rained in or something like that. And we're going to create just a small kick line right here where he would be kicking dirt out of the burrow and back into the exterior. So maybe like he's sitting on his front porch, as it were. So we're going to make sure this is kind of smooth out, get it ready for some of that mud texture that we plan in the future, and maybe a little bit of that water feature. We don't want the water feature to go truly down into that burrow, so we'll probably try to make sure we kind of keep that separated a little bit. Adding a few little scratches here. Now, of course, he would be scratching or kicking that dirt out of the burrow there with his hind legs probably. So we would have a few little like just kick marks right there. You don't have to be super deep, just very subtle, very nice, and keep it very simplistic overall. Removing that clay, putting it back in the container to be warmed again later. That's why you gotta love monster clay. You just remove it, add it, remove it, add it, and you can just warm it up and melt it down as you see fit. I'm liking how that looks right there. It's looking for a deck. I'm good, guys. Okay. So with that done, we can get ready to move on to the next stage here. Now, you can nitpick over this all day long if you want to, or you can just go ahead and get ready to move on. We're going to detail the edges of the front portion here, and once we get happy with how that overall texture looks here, then we'll start to build up little, let's just say platforms of rock texture or dirt texture where the feet are going to be. Because as I stated in the original time-lapse project of me making the actual gopher frog itself out of monster clay, like that sculpting process in that time-lapse video, I do intend to possibly cast this with or without the base. So if I decide just to pour my casting plastic into the part of the mold that just has the frog, then I would just get a frog. But if I wanted to cast the base along with it as a full diorama, which I'm going to sell that as it is, as its own little small like windowsill / little small shelf diorama, then I can do that as well. So I can cast this as a full diorama or just the frog itself. The frog itself was probably going to make an appearance in the Peregrine Falcon, which is coming up in the near future. So here we are. Now he's sitting pretty level, right? But because we're going to go through the casting process, we need to make sure that he doesn't have super big gaps between his feet and the existing puddle mud formation. So what we're going to do is we're going to put a little dollop of clay underneath each individual foot. We're not going to push him down. Instead, we're just going to just test fit him ever so often until we get the overall good even coat around his feet. And then what we're going to do is we're going to ever so slightly blend his feet down into the rock formation. And then that's going to give us the overall blend line between the two items here. Because like I said, we can come in later on and we can make like a muddy puddle effect, and we can make some of that mud come up on the edges of his feet, things like that. As long as it's like subtle and not too overpowering, then that's completely cool. Blending that in with just an existing rock, just kind of smoothing out those edges so that it looks like it's already with the puddle. It's not like sticking out, like obviously. And then we'll just kind of see how it looks there. So we'll test for our little frog again. I think he needs a name. Do you guys think he needs a name? Not just Gopher Frog? Mr. Burrow? I don't know. Let me know in the description below. What should this little frog's name be? I might even name it that on Etsy. We'll see. Maybe I'll give the best name some credit in one of the next upcoming videos. It's like a reminder that this is out there or something like that. Like, hey guys, do y'all remember Mr. Burrow? Or this YouTube subscriber was the one who picked out this name. Didn't they make such a great choice? I don't know. Leave in the description. What should his name be? So still building up that little exterior edge right there. As you can see, I'm kind of putting it around his feet there. Using a little bit of a different tool here just to kind of just smooth out those lines a little bit, and then I'll just barely detail it with the rock again. Here we go, just smoothing that out a little bit. I really love this tool. It's one of my favorites. And it has a sharper blade and then a more dull, flat-out blade. It has a lot of versatility as far as just moving clay, blending it, and pushing clay around. It's really nice. A little bit of texture there from the existing rock that we have nearby. Do not ask me what type of rocks these are. I am not a geologist, so yeah. All right, putting in the frog back on there and just applying a few last levels of detail there. And then I think he is almost done. He is almost ready. You can see there's a lot of voids under his legs. Now the problem with that is in the casting process, all the silicone or the latex is going to settle underneath the frog, and we can't have that. What it's going to mean is that mold that we create to reproduce this is going to get torn every single time. So it just means more legwork on the other end when I make the casts of it. So what I'll do is I'm going to put clay underneath his butt and around his legs, just so that latex cannot settle underneath his body. And what I'll do is after I cast it, I will use a Dremel tool to Dremel away any of the excess underneath his body. It'll be a little bit time consuming and very detail oriented, but it will be completely fine, and it will leave a very strong structure behind. Now I can also leave those if I wanted to and just kind of blend them with some existing dirt textures, so I can also completely do that. That would be all right as well. Now here we are. This is actually a clip of the frog right before I began the latex mold making process. And we were using latex 407 for that, and I'll be covering that in that individual video. But as you can see here, this has a little bit of condensation on it. I actually had this in the freezer for about an hour before I pulled it out, so you're just checking it out now out in the workshop where we're going to be making those molds, which is pretty cool. So if you want to see that video, make sure you hit up the description below. I will leave this at the very top of the description as a playlist, so you can check out all the old videos or the newest ones that are out, as well as maybe that consolidated video of all of the processes just in a super duper time lapse, like clip-like style. It's kind of cool to repurpose the content and show you to you in a different form. Definitely make sure you like and subscribe, guys. And if you're looking for one of these frog dioramas for yourself, you can always find me on Etsy as well as Shopify, and just definitely reach out to me if you want something custom made. Don't forget to also check out the peregrine falcon, which is also maybe not going to feature one of these frogs as a surprise for that commissioner. It's just kind of cool. So I hope you enjoyed the overall rock formation of this little guy. I will see you guys on the next awesome monster clay sculpting video. Later, guys.